The Hanged Man. In this tent, suspended high above you, there are people, acrobats, trapeze artists, aerialists, illuminated by dozens of round glowing lamps hanging from the top of the tent like planets or stars. There are no nets. You watch the performance from this precarious vantage point, directly below the performers with nothing in between. There are girls in feathered costumes who spin at various heights, suspended by ribbons that they can manipulate, marionettes that control their own strings. Normal chairs with legs and backs act as trapezes. Round spheres that resemble bird cages rise and descend, while one or more aerialists move from within the sphere to without, standing on the top or hanging from the bars on the bottom. In the center of the tent there is a man in a tuxedo, suspended by one leg that is tied with a silver cord, hands clasped behind his back. He begins to move extremely slowly. His arms reach out from his sides, first one and then the other, until they hang below his head. He starts to spin faster and faster until he is only a blur at the end of a rope. He stops suddenly, and he falls. The audience dives out of the way below him, clearing a space of bare, hard ground below. You cannot bear to watch. You cannot look away. Then he stops at eye level with the crowd, suspended by the silver rope that now seems endlessly long, top hat undisturbed on his head, arms calmly by his side. As the crowd regains his composure, he lifts a gloved hand and removes his hat. Bending at the waist, he takes a dramatic, inverted bow. Oneiromancy. Concord, Massachusetts, October 1902. Bailey spends the entire day willing the sun to set, but it defies him and keeps its usual pace across the sky, a pace that Bailey has never really thought about before, but today finds excruciatingly slow. He almost wishes it were a school day, so he would have something to help pass the hours. He wonders if he should take a nap, but he is far too excited about the sudden appearance of the circus to possibly sleep. Dinner passes the same way it has for months, stretching of silence broken by his mother's attempts at polite conversation and Caroline's occasional sighs. His mother mentions the circus, or more specifically, the influx of people it will bring. Bailey expects the silence to fall again, but instead Caroline turns to him. "Didn't we dare you to sneak into the circus the last time it was here, Bailey?" Her tone is curious and light, as though she truly does not remember whether or not such a thing occurred. "What? During the day?" his mother asks, and Caroline nods vaguely. "Yes," Bailey says quietly, willing the uncomfortable silence to return. "Bailey," his mother says, managing to turn his name into a disappointment-laced admonishment. Bailey is not certain how it is his fault, being the daree and not the darer. But Caroline responds before he can protest. "Oh, he didn't do it," she says, as though she now recalls the incident clearly. Bailey only shrugs. "Well, I would hope not," his mother says. The silence resumes, and Bailey stares out the window, wondering what exactly constitutes nightfall. He thinks perhaps it would be best to get to the gates as soon as it could even remotely be considered dusk, and wait if necessary. His feet feel itchy beneath the table, and he wonders how soon he'll be able to escape. It takes ages to clear the table, an eternity to help his mother with the dishes. Caroline disappears to her room, and his father pulls out the newspaper. "Where are you going?" his mother asks as he puts on his scarf. "I'm going to the circus," Bailey says. "Don't be too late," she says. "You have work to do." "I won't," Bailey says, relieved that she has neglected to specify a time, leaving too late up to interpretation. "Take your sister," she adds. Only because there is no way to leave the house without his mother watching to see whether or not he stops at Caroline's room. Bailey knocks at the half-closed door. "Go away," his sister says. I'm going to the circus if you would care to join me, Bailey says, his voice dull. He already knows what her answer will be. No, she says, as predictable as the dinner-time silence. How childish, she adds, shooting him a disdainful glare. Bailey leaves without another word, letting the wind slam the front door behind him. The sun is just beginning to set, and there are more people out than usual at this time of day, all walking in the same direction. As he walks, his excitement begins to wane. Perhaps it is childish. Perhaps it will not be the same. When he reaches the field, there is already a crowd gathered, and he is relieved that there are plenty of patrons his own age or much older, and only a few have children with them. A pair of girls around his age giggles as he passes them, trying to catch his eye. He cannot tell if it is meant to be flattering or not. Bailey finds a spot to stand within the crowd. He waits, watching the closed iron gates, wondering if the circus will be different than he remembers. And he wonders in the back of his mind if the red-haired girl in white is somewhere inside. The low orange rays from the sun makes everything, including the circus, look as though it is aflame before the light disappears completely. It is quicker than Bailey expected, the moment that shifts from fire to twilight, and then the circus lights begin flickering on, all over the tents. The crowd oohs and ahs appropriately, but a few in the front gasp in surprise when the massive sign above the gates begin to sputter and spark. Bailey can't help but smile when it is fully lit, shining like a beacon. Du Cirque de Rêve. While the day of waiting was tediously slow, the line to enter the circus moves remarkably fast, and soon Bailey is standing at the ticket booth, purchasing a single admission. The winding path speckled with stars seems endless as he feels his way through the dark turns, anxiously anticipating the brightness at the end. The first thing he thinks when he reaches the illuminated courtyard is that it smells the same, of smoke and caramel, and something else that he cannot place. He is not sure where to start. There are so many tents, so many choices. He thinks perhaps he should walk around a bit first, before deciding which tents to enter. He thinks also that by simply wandering the circus, he might improve his chance of happening upon the red-haired girl, though he refuses to admit to himself that he is looking for her. Silly to look for a girl he only met once under extremely strange circumstances several years ago. There's no reason to believe that she'd even remember him or recognize him, and he is not entirely sure he would recognize her either, for that matter. He decides to walk into the circus, through the courtyard with the bonfire, and out the other side, and then attempt to work his way back. It is as good a plan as any, and the crowd might not be as thick on the far side. But first he thinks he should get a mulled cider. It does not take him long to find the proper vendor in the courtyard. He pays for his cup, the steaming concoction contained in black and white marbled swirls, and wonders for a moment before his first sip if it won't taste as good as he remembers. He has recalled that taste countless times in his head, and despite the wealth of apples in the area, no cider with or without spices have ever tasted as good. He hesitates before taking the tiniest of sips. It tastes even better than he remembers. He picks a path to take, and along it, before the entrances to the surrounding tents, there is a small group gathered around a raised platform. A woman stands on the platform in a very fitted costume covered in black and silver swirls. She is twisting and bending in such a way that it seems both horrible and elegant. Bailey stops to join the spectators, even though it is almost painful to watch. The contortionist lifts a small silver metal hoop from the ground, brandishing it with a few simple but impressive movements. She passes it to a man in the front of the crowd in order to establish that it is solid. When he hands it back to her, she passes her entire body through it, extending her limbs in fluid dance-like motions. After discarding the hoop, she places a small box in the center of the platform. The box looks no more than a foot wide or high, though in reality it is slightly larger than that. while the act of a fully grown, if below average-sized woman condensing herself into such a confined space would be impressive, regardless of the details of the box. It is made even more impressive in this case by the fact that this box is made of glass, completely transparent. The edges are metal, oxidized to a blackish tinge, but the side panels in the lid are clear glass, so she is visible the entire time as she bends and twists and folds herself into the tiny space. She does it slowly, making each minute movement part of the show, until her body and head are completely within the box, and only her hand remains without, sticking out the top. The view from Bailey's perspective looks impossible. A bit of leg here, the curve of a shoulder there, part of her other arm underneath a foot. Only one hand remains. It waves cheerfully before pulling the lid closed. It latches automatically, and the box is undeniably closed, with the contortionist clearly visible inside. And then the glass box with the woman trapped inside slowly fills with white smoke. It crawls through the tiny cracks and spaces not occupied by limbs or torsos, and seeps between her fingers as they press against the glass. The smoke thickens, obscuring the contortionist completely. There is only white smoke visible inside the box, and it continues to ripple and undulate against the glass. Suddenly, with a popping noise, the box breaks. Glass panels fall to the sides, and the lid collapses downward. Curls of smoke rise into the night air. The box, or rather the small pile of glass upon the platform that had once been a box, is empty. The contortionist is gone. The crowd waits for several moments, but nothing happens. The last wisps of smoke dissipate. The crowd begins to disperse. Bailey takes a closer look as he walks by, wondering if the contortionist is somehow concealed in the platform. But it is solid wood and open underneath. She has vanished completely, despite the plain evidence that there was nowhere for her to go. Bailey continues down the winding path. He finishes his cider and finds a bin to discard his cup, though as soon as he places it within the shadow container, it seems to vanish. He walks on, reading signs, trying to decide which tent to enter. Some are large and decorated with flourishes and long descriptions of their contents, but the one that catches his eye is smaller, as is the tent on which it hangs. Looping white letters on the black background. Feats of illustrious illusion. The entrance is open, and the line of patrons files into the illusionist's tent. Bailey joins them. Inside it is lit by a line of black iron sconces along the rounded wall, and contains nothing but a ring of plain wooden chairs. There are only about 20 of them, in 2 staggered rows, so that the view from each seat is comparable, but Bailey chooses a seat in the inside row across from the entrance. The rest of the seats fill quickly, save for 2, the one to his immediate left and another across the circle. Bailey notices 2 things at once. First, that he can no longer see where the entrance had been. The space where the audience had entered now appears to be a solid wall, seamlessly blending with the rest of the tent. Second, there is now a dark-haired woman in a black coat sitting to his left. He is certain that she was not there before the door disappeared. Then his attention is removed from both these events as the empty chair across the circle bursts into flame. The panic is instant. Those occupying the chairs closest to the flaming chair abandon their seats and rush for the door, only to find that there is no longer a door to be found, only a solid wall. The flames grow steadily higher, staying close to the chair, licking round the wood, though it does not appear to be burning. Bailey looks again at the woman to his left, and she winks at him before standing and walking to the center of the circle. Amidst the panic, she calmly unbuttons her coat and removes it, tossing it with a delicate gesture toward the burning chair. What had been a heavy wool coat becomes a long piece of black silk that ripples like water over the chair. The flames vanish. Only a few lingering wisps of smoke remain, along with the sharp smell of charred wood that is slowly changing to the comforting scent of a fireplace, tinged with something like cinnamon or clove. The woman standing in the center of the circle of chairs pulls back the black silk with a flourish, revealing a still intact chair on which now perch several snow-white doves. Another flourish and the black silk folds and curves in on itself, becoming a black top hat. The woman places it on her head, topping off an ensemble that looks like a ball gown fashioned out of the night sky. Black silk dotted with sparkling white crystals. She acknowledges her audience with a subtle bow. The illusionist has made her entrance. A few people, including Bailey, managed to applaud, while those who had abandoned their seats returned to them, looking both disturbed and curious. The performance is continuous. The displays Bailey has difficulty thinking of as tricks meld one into the other. The doves vanish frequently, only to reappear on hats or under chairs. There is also a black raven, far too large to have been cleverly concealed. It is only after the performance has gone on for some time that Bailey slowly realizes that because of the circle of chairs, the shape and closeness of the space, there is no room for mirrors or tricks of the light. Everything is immediate and palpable. She even transforms one audience member's pocket watch from metal to sand and back again. At one point, all the chairs float some distance off the ground, and while the movement is steady and secure, Bailey's toes barely graze the floor, and he clutches the sides of his chair nervously. At the end of the act, the illusionist takes a bow with a pivoting turn, acknowledging the entire circle as the audience applauds. As she completes the rotation, she is no longer there. Only a few sparkling shimmers remain, echoes of the crystals in her gown. The door reappears in the side of the tent, and the small audience makes their way out. Bailey lags behind, glancing back as he leaves at the spot where the illusionist had been. Outside, though it was not there before, is another raised platform, much like the one the contortionist stood on. But the figure on this platform does not move. Bailey almost thinks it is a statue, dressed in a white gown edged in matching fur that cascades beyond the platform to the ground. Her hair and skin, even her eyelashes, are an icy white. But she moves, very, very slowly. So slowly that Bailey cannot pinpoint exact motions, only slight changes. Soft flakes of iridescent snow float to the ground, falling from her like leaves from a tree. Bailey walks around, looking at her from every angle. Her eyes follow him, though the snow-flecked lashes do not blink. There's a small silver plaque on the platform, partially obscured by the cascading gown. It reads, "In Memoriam," but it does not specify who it is for.